Hello, and welcome to the fourth edition of the Dharma Voices for Animals Speakers Series. Today, we're very fortunate to have our very special guest, Dr. Allan Kornberg, and our host, our president and co-founder, Bob Isaacson. And Bob, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Charles. So I'm excited to have Allan Kornberg with us today. I'll be introducing Allan just in a few minutes. He's going to be talking. He's a physician, pediatrician, and he knows like a whole lot about plant-based nutrition, and he'll be sharing some of the wisdom and knowledge that he has accumulated over many years of practice with you. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes, as we do at the beginning of our speaker series. This is our fourth now. I want to thank Charles, by the way, for setting this up. He's our communications director, DVA's communications director. So this is our fourth speakers series, and we hope to continue this for a long time with your support and with your help. And I'll start out today sharing with you some updates. Welcome everyone, wherever you are, and people joining us from all over the world. And as I like to say, that the sun never sets on DVA. So right now, as we're starting out at 9 o'clock in California, it's noon hour in the Boston area, Eastern time zone in the US. It is midnight in Thailand and in Vietnam, 10:30 p.m. in Sri Lanka. And where our Brazil chapter is, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's actually difficult. It's a challenge to find a time which is convenient for everyone. I guess we could say it's impossible, but this is a time we're going to be using for a lot of different reasons. So thank you for joining. Please share links with your friends. Encourage them to join us as well. We're going to have some really interesting speaker series for you, episodes starting right now and today. So a couple of updates that I want to share. First is what we're doing at U.S. centers. So the centers, the Buddhist centers in the United States, and we have assembled a wonderful team. And our team consists of Tara Brock, internationally known and respected Dharma teacher. Tanisara, same thing could be said about Tanisara, very well known internationally and very well respected. Andrew Bear. Andrew was our chapter leader for many years and is now our ambassador in Silicon Valley. And also Dean Rockwell, who's called him our super volunteer. Dean has put together an amazing amount of information on U.S. centers. So we need to know, who we talk to there, what the policies of the centers are. Are they vegetarian? Are they vegan? None of the above. And we're going to be working on this. We're developing letters, and we're already working with, I'd say, about 30 centers now in the U.S. So this will be big with your help and with your support. And the way you can help us is just by dropping us an email. So email address, it's just friends@dharmavoicesforAnimals.org. And let us know if you attend a center and the food served there is less than fully compassionate, less than vegan meals. And just let us know about this. Let us know where your center is and maybe how they can improve, and we'll put them in our database and probably try to encourage communication. We'll reach out to them and see if we can affect some change, which is what we've been doing. We've had a lot of success in doing this kind of behind the scenes, talking about centers that know they can be better. They could, pretty much every center can do better about serving compassionate food or avoiding food that harms. So that's a summary of the U.S. I want to say a few words about what we're doing around the world. Exciting news, we recently hired our assistant director of our Vietnam project. And I want to congratulate her. We just hired her this past week. Her name is Ha Vu Tai Lien, and everyone calls her Ha. And just tell you what she's been up to just in her first week or two of working with us. Working with our Venerable Director Juan, one of the top Buddhist leaders in Vietnam, The two of them managed to persuade a dog meat restaurant. Yes, there are dog meat restaurants, actually many places in the world, and including Vietnam. And so both our venerable director and our new assistant director persuaded, this was not easy, but persuaded the owner of a dog meat restaurant to stop serving dog meat, not serve any animal flesh or products, and open a plant-based restaurant. They're completing reconstruction now, and the restaurant should be open next week. And Howe was not finished with that. She found out through her channel of friends that another restaurant, non-vegetarian restaurant, serving all kinds of animal flesh, was there in Hanoi, capital of Vietnam, where we are starting to work. She persuaded that owner, this is the second one in 2 weeks, to become vegetarian. And Ha also teaches vegetarian cooking in Hanoi. So she invites the owners to her class and then counsels them to transition to a compassionate serving over in their restaurant. So this is what we're doing. You know, we can't get to big crowds of people before the pandemic. I wish everyone out there to be safe and healthy, everyone that's listening to the call and all of your loved ones and friends. But, you know, we can't go to big gatherings at the pagodas or temples because they have a rule. It's not curfew, but it's kind of a lockdown rule in Vietnam because of the pandemic. So we're doing now what we can do, just smaller conversations, but we're seeing some big results. Thousands and thousands of people will be eating at these restaurants. So this is what we're doing. And then a few words about Sri Lanka. So again, the temple visits are limited. The Sunday school visits are limited because of the pandemic. We're still doing this. We're doing it on a smaller scale, and we're using Zoom and WhatsApp. That's the preferred application in that country to give presentations. And we are also really turning up the heat on our advocacy for the animal welfare bill. So this is a bill that's going to really, really change the culture in Sri Lanka. If we can get this passed, it definitely helps farm animals on confinement and on transportation, really important. And it also helps the wildlife and companion animals and lots of stray dogs, lots of homeless dogs and cats around Sri Lanka. It protects them as well. And we just had an important vote from the cabinet ministers. So these are, they would, in the US, we call these folks the cabinet. There they call them cabinet ministers. They voted at the end of October to unanimously approve the animal welfare bill. And so now it goes to the parliament, and our people there, our team has already spoken to and taken videos of 92 members of the parliament in Sri Lanka, 92 members fully supporting our bill. We also have the support of the president and the prime minister, the two most important political leaders there. So we're thinking there'll be a vote in January. We're really turning up the heat there. We want to get this passed. This would really help the culture and the consciousness of Sri Lankans towards animals. And oh, by the way, there's a petition there where you could find it either on our Facebook page or at change.org. And it's a simple petition urging the lawmakers, the members of parliament, the parliament itself, to pass the AW bill. And then just a couple words about Thailand. I don't want to forget Thailand, amazing things going on there. Our director, Banks, has been visiting. I think he's now seen 15. We do a 3-hour presentation with the help of doctors there. He's a PhD candidate in public health. And Banks has been to 15 of the largest and most influential temples, or Wats, they call them Wats in Thailand, giving talks about both the health benefits of a plant-based diet and also, of course, about the Buddhist teachings about compassion and non-harming. We are making great headway in Thailand, and we had our first cooking class where we actually went into one of the Watts, a major, a large and important Watt in that country, and gave a 3-hour cooking class organized by our director of banks. So we want to do a lot more of that. And we're limited a bit by the money that we can raise because those classes cost us about $120, much of that going to for the food. So that brings me to the last thing I want to mention is we want to urge you, and if you're not a member of DVA, please go to our website, which is dharmavoicesforanimals.org, and go to the Become a Member. It's a tab at the top, Take Action, Become a Member, and take you like a minute to become a member. Please urge your friends and family to do the same thing. You get a newsletter to keep you up on all recent developments, and you really help us by doing this. So please help us spread the word. We need more members so we can spread our message around the world of compassion for animals, and particularly to move the Buddhist world and Buddhist communities away from eating animals and eating animal products. So with that, I want to introduce Allan Kornberg. So Allan's a friend and colleague now for several years at DVA. Allan is a physician, so he's MD, also has an MBA. He's been meditating for nearly 20 years. He is a pediatrician, that's his specialty, and he's practiced both primary care and emergency pediatrics. He served as a vice chair and associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Buffalo. He advocated on behalf of survivors of child abuse and sexual assault, and co-authored a textbook called Child Abuse and Neglect, a Medical Reference. He's also had a number of leadership positions in healthcare, including medical director and later CEO for Network Health, an important organization, and that the organization serves impoverished families in Massachusetts, where Allan lives. Also, an amazing record in animal rights, animal protection. I'm just going to give you just a couple highlights of that. He was the executive director of in the U.S. for the World Animal Protection Organization, WAP. He has served as executive director for Farm Sanctuary, a huge and important AR group in the United States, and that focuses on lifetime care for abused farm animals, also education and advocacy. Allan's been a board member and the board chair of Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries and has been its executive director. Also serves currently as the board chair, I think it's currently of, I think so, right, Allan, of the Animal Defense Partnership. Well, this is a great group. They they offer pro bono legal services to animal organizations, animal protection. We, DVA, has used their services, and outstanding first class legal help, and we don't have to pay for it, even better. And also he's worked with several animal charities in their capacity of capacity building, improving, expanding the organization. So that's a lot of stuff, but this is just only a tiny bit of what Allan has accomplished in his life. So with that, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Allan Kornberg.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it. Well, that was really a wonderful introduction, and if that means anything to you, it lets you know. But you can tell, looking at me, how old I am, because that's a lot of stuff over a lot of years. You can see the gray hairs. So let me share my slides, and then I think we will be good to go. The slides showing up okay? Okay, good. All right. So my primary, I'm delighted to be a board member of Dharma Voices for Animals. It's been an honor and a privilege, continue in that role. My primary gig now is I'm the medical director for the U.S. for Physicians Association for Nutrition, and we work on educating doctors, nurses, dietitians, other clinicians, the public, policymakers about the value and benefit of whole food, plant-based nutrition. And so, without further ado, let's get into our talk. So today, you know who we are here. We're DVA, and that's me. I'll flip this up at the end of the talk as well. But here's my my PAN, my Physician Association for Nutrition email address, a.kornberg@pan-usa.org, and my my phone number, so feel free to reach out anytime I can be helpful. So today's talk, so we'll look at these areas: lifestyle medicine and blue zones. I'll say more about that briefly, just briefly. Climate and diet, power of nutrition. That's really the gist of this talk, which is about the value, the power of plant-based nutrition, and then some comments about vegan diets, myths, what's true, what's not, and we'll go through some of the micro and macronutrients. Like where do you get your protein from? What about B12 and D and omega-3 and all of that? I'll say a few words briefly about my physician and other clinician colleagues and the opportunity and challenge around plant-based diets and doctors, and just wrap up saying a word about PAN. So really, bullets 3 and 4 are the primary focus of today's talk: power of nutrition and vegan diets and nutrients. So let's start with the broadest view first, which is lifestyle medicine. And you can see on the bottom of this slide, I give a reference, a website for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is a wonderful organization, lifestylemedicine.org. And you can see on the bottom of the bullets, I highlighted, because that's today's talk: healthy diet, predominantly whole food, plant-based. And again, today's talk, while there are obviously ethical and faith-based and environmental reasons to eat in whole or in large part a plant-based diet, my focus today is about nutrition and health. So in terms of having the most years on average that any of us can have, and our friends and our family and our colleagues that are productive and healthy, and the longest, these are all attributes that encourage that. So having a life purpose, having a sense of community. Nowadays, a lot of it is in 2D and in Zoom and otherwise virtual for many of us, not all of us. Stress management matters a great deal. And speaking to a Buddhist-oriented group, you don't need me to speak to that, but even for non-Buddhist, meditation, mindfulness is a wonderful tool towards stress management and good health. Good sleep. It's always a humorous comment to make when I'm talking to doctors and residents and medical students, but it's true. Good sleep is health producing and reduces dementia risk over time. Low ETOH alcohol. So again, making no faith-based comments here at all. This is all about human health. Low alcohol consumption is conducive towards good health. Exercise matters, and a healthy diet, predominantly or in 100% part whole food, plant-based. So blue zones first. Blue zones are areas of the world, sort of pockets in larger regions or countries where people live longer and healthier lives. There's one in the U.S., Loma Linda. Actually, Bob, Loma Linda is probably 100 miles north of you and north of San Diego, up the I-15, I-15, I think, right? But anyway, up north of you. So and so it's and you can see there are blue zones around the world in Sardinia, in Okinawa, Japan, Greece, there's a region in Costa Rica, and you can see just put in a couple of pics of native folks to Costa Rica and to Okinawa. So what are blue zones in more detail? There are areas where there's high longevity. So the average lifespan is at least 10 years greater than expected. And from on a population basis, 10 years is huge. That's a huge difference. Has a large number of, I always stumble on this word, but the centenarians, people that live to be 100 or more. Lowest mortality of people of middle age, 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. Fewer heart attacks, strokes, and cancer and the like. And age adjusted, much lower rates of dementia. So, live long, healthy lives. Live long and prosper, as they say, right? So what's striking is that all these blue zones are geographically separated across the globe, and there are pockets in larger regions. What's strikingly similar of each of the blue zones across other lifestyle changes is diet. That folks in blue zones eat a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet. And so you can see here so Loma Linda, just to pick and again, I know we have a global audience here. I just chose a U.S. example, and this was a really from a medical science evidence-based review. This was a very well done, rigorous study. So Adventists, so Seventh-day Adventists are a faith-based group, and part of their faith, and there's a large number of Adventists in Loma Linda area, and there's a health center there that cares for anyone, but especially Seventh-day Adventists. Ben Carson, by the way, who will soon be the outgoing U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, is a pediatric neurosurgeon. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, and he eats a plant-based diet on a faith-based reason. So in any event, you can see the website if you want to read more about it, adventisthealthstudy.org. Researchers looked at 100,000 people. That's a large study for any researcher. About half of the population were vegan or vegetarian. The other half were not. And so just a few findings, again, for a controlled population, same faith-based community. No matter cholesterol level, diabetes status, diabetes or not, blood pressure level, or any metabolic findings, vegetarians and vegans have lower health risks, lower morbidity, lower mortality. For weight, which of course has great import in terms of being able to live healthy and live longer. The data in the study shows a progressive increase. When one goes from a vegan diet to a vegetarian diet to a mostly vegetarian but not entirely diet to a omnivorous or carnivorous diet, weight increases. Again, all controlled for gender, for age, for height, obviously. So all controlled. Well done, rigorous study. Cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, and metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is obesity and sort of kind of a precursor of type 2 diabetes, of what we used to call adult onset diabetes. Also the same trend. The closer one's diet over time is to being vegan, the lower the health risk. And finally, interestingly, since being overweight, being obese, eating a typical, I'll use the term Western diet, is a high risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes occurs usually in young children, and it's an autoimmune disease. It's less common, and it's not related to diet. It's one of those things. But type 2 is much more common, increasing dramatically based upon poor diet and obesity. And so for type 2 diabetes, the prevalence in vegans and vegetarians, people that don't eat meat but eat animal products, egg and dairy, the amount of type 2 diabetes was half that for non-vegetarians. Even when controlling for socioeconomic status, lifestyle status, it didn't matter if you rode your bike, if you jogged, it didn't matter if you're rich or poor. If you eat a veg diet, or better, I could say to this audience, the incidence of type 2 is half, which is striking in a population study. So really important, well-controlled, rigorous study with a somewhat, not insular, but somewhat contained population. Let's say a few words about climate and diet. It's not the main point of this talk, but obviously we're all interested in and many of us quite concerned about climate change. So this bar graph, and it comes from the Center for Sustainable Systems at Michigan, and I've made a point when I have a few slides in this talk that reference either universities or charities, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and I've made a point of not choosing sort of hard-edged activist charities, which clearly have a perspective or bias, but have used data from more or less straight and narrow, middle of the bell-shaped curve kinds of organizations and academic groups. So you can see that on a serving, equivalent serving basis, if you look at the left, the gray bar, which is beef, which is eating from cattle, that there's far and away the highest amount of CO2 that gets exhaled into the atmosphere per serving, far and away. I don't have a bar here. I probably should for sheep and lamb. That would be that would be the second bar. It would be less than beef and more than cheese. You can see then declining order. You can see cheese, then eating pigs, pork, then eggs and milk, chicken and other poultry, other birds. And then as soon as you get to plant-based products, rice, legumes, lentils, beans, and peas, and just some sort of random examples of vegetables, carrots and potatoes, it's almost, in analytical terms, almost asymptotic. There's almost no impact on CO2. So it's a dramatic orders of magnitude difference in terms of Well, we all can do something about climate, and how we live our lives more broadly matters. What we put in our mouths 3 times a day or more is something we totally control and matters. So the percent impact of what's the impact of human diets on um, climate change, on CO2 produced into the atmosphere. You'll see numbers anywhere from 18% is the lowest I've found to 51% is the highest uh, of consuming animals and its impact on climate change, on CO2, objectively measured. And so you can see here on the right, um, actual ag production, deforestation, which is huge. It's huge in the U.S. It's obviously huge in Brazil. It's huge in many countries. Processing, transport, packing, etc. So in this graph, nearly half of all climate change is nearly half of all CO2, without getting into the science of climate change, is based on animal consumption. You'll see some studies showing 18%, 25%, 30%. It's large to nearly half. It's material. More than material, it's the single biggest cause. That is to say, eating animals. Before we get to, again, the main subject today is individual human health for us, for our families, for those close to us. Before we get there, just a couple of words about the public health population aspects of eating animals. So, and again, sorry for those of you who are in not North America, but I've got a lot of U.S. Examples here. I think many people are shocked by this first bullet. Over 70% of all antibiotics used in the U.S. are given to animals on factory farms. The conditions on factory farms, because most of us know, are horrendous for the animals, of course, just horrendous. And because the animals are confined in terribly unhealthy, terribly congested environments, the risk of disease to the animals, which for industry, from their point of view, is economic loss, is huge. So the animals are all given, not therapeutically, not as if anybody pays attention to one animal being sick. All the animals are given lots of antibiotics to have them live long enough to be brought to slaughter. And so by giving all these animals antibiotics, we're creating resistant bacteria, is what happens. So when you read about staph resistant to various antibiotics and other resistant bacteria that are harder and harder for doctors to treat, a large cause of that is overuse of antibiotics. Sometimes that's giving patients, medical doctors giving us antibiotics when it's not necessary. You have a cold, a virus, you don't need an antibiotic. You get one anyhow. That's not good. So, but 70% or more of all antibiotics are prescribed, not even prescribed, just given sort of by the barrel in this country and many other countries as well, are given to animals in factory farms. Couldn't have a talk like this in this year without talking about pandemics, right? So nearly all pandemics are caused by zoonotic disease. That is to say, a bacteria or a virus that that lives its infectious life in a non-human animal, and then crosses to humans, and then creates pandemic. Since we have no resistance, and when bacteria and viruses cross from non-human animals to humans, they act in strange and bizarre and more difficult ways. And again, there's typically not any pre-existing human resistance on an individual or population basis. Factory farming, wet markets, if the Chinese Communist Party is to be believed, and seem to think this is likely true, no one's really sure. COVID first crossed the humans in Wuhan from a wet market, a live market of bats. The other animal cause of pandemics, as opposed to direct eating of animals, is deforestation. When wildlife are forced to live in narrower and narrower confines because of deforestation, and probably the single biggest cause for deforestation is chopping down forest so that we can either have cattle graze, or we can grow soy, corn, and other grains to feed animals, to be fed to humans. So when these animals are kept in have a more confined space as wildlife, they come more into contact with humans and or insects and other ticks, insects, and so on will bring disease over to us. And that's how plague happened in the Middle Ages. There are other examples of that. So it's mostly about individual health, but also it's climate. There's antibiotic resistance, and big time this year. How can we not pay attention? It's pandemics. Michael Greger is a colleague, well-respected position in this space. One of his quotes, I have another couple of Greger quotes later. If you actually want to create global pandemics, then build factory farms. Michael Greger is a physician. He's a fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He's the author of How Not to Die. He's a founder of Nutrition Facts. And he's a colleague. He's on my board, on the Pan USA board. Okay, to the core now, power of nutrition. So per the World Health Organization, if the major risk factors for non-communicable diseases were eliminated, around 3/4 of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes would be prevented, and 40% of cancer would be prevented. Enormous differences. NCDs, non-communicable diseases, are preventable through effective interventions, population health interventions, and there's all about health that tackles risk factors. Booze and tobacco, obviously, inadequate exercise, and unhealthy diets. All right, so what do we need to do to eat a healthier diet? So there are 5 main food groups. I'm showing 4 of them here. 5 main food groups in the universe of whole food plant-based nutrition: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and legumes, peas, lentils, and beans. I don't have legumes up here. I should. So if you look at, and this is, and this comes also, if I can move my PowerPoint picture down here. Oops, sorry. This comes from the Institute for Health Economics and Environment. I may be saying that wrong, so let me get rid of, there we go. Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Sorry. I have my picture blocking that slide. Again, another science-oriented, straight and narrow, non-advocacy kind of NGO. The average North American eats the equivalent of 1 apple a day in the top left in the fruit category. It doesn't mean just apples, but using apples as an example. If we follow the guidelines, we should eat the equivalent of 3 apples a day. Again, not just apples, but that much fruit, just as an example. So you can see a difference, but not a huge difference. Bottom left, nuts and seeds. We eat very little. I mean, I eat a lot of walnuts and almonds and flax and chia, but the average North American, this is true for most of the West, eats very, very little nuts and seeds. Here, the average North American is eating 1.5 walnut halves a day, and needs to eat 8 to 13, just short of an ounce. So a handful would do the job. Whole grains, top right, average adults eating equivalent of less than 1 slice of whole grain bread a day, and we need to eat 3 to 5. And again, it's not just this example of bread, it's anything like that. And for vegetables, we're less worse here. The average person is eating about 3 carrots a day as an example, and should eat 6 or 7 or so. So these are not crazy, out of control goals to reach for those of us that aren't doing this yet. They're reachable and manageable pretty readily. There we go. Sorry. Inflammation, and here the sort of clock-like diagram uses the phrase in the middle, inflammaging. And so basically, and it's true for most everything, whole food plant-based diets are anti-inflammatory, which is really, really good for us. As we say in Boston, wicked healthy for us. And eating a meat-based diet, especially red meats, especially processed meats, but a meat-based diet in general is pro-inflammatory, or causes inflammation and causes disease. So if you just go around this diagram, starting at the top, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, heart disease, hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, retinal damage and blindness, MS, general increase in morbidity, mortality, which is illness and death, ALS, insulin resistance in type 2, weakened bones from osteoporosis, a number of different cancers, many, many cancers. On a population basis, dramatic reductions because the inflammation is reduced dramatically by eating a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet, and dramatic increase by eating a omnivorous or carnivorous diet. Most of what I've alluded to has been about disease prevention. It's striking and interesting that there's also disease reversal. Even when disease is already present, PBD is a whole food plant-based diet. Disease reversal as well as prevention when one switches to a whole food plant-based diet. It's well shown, well done in my business. Double-blinded randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of medical research for all of these diseases: cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, of course, and a lot of that's reducing salt. Rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune inflammatory disease. When one switches to a whole food plant-based diet, one can see some aspects of disease reversal. It's almost humorous when someone has had a heart attack, and most physicians don't bring this up at all, which is the work that I'm in, which is to help support my colleagues in seeing the health benefits of plant-based diets. But if a physician or a dietitian or nurse or another clinician said to a person who survived a heart attack but is suffering and has real risk in terms of longevity and well-being, if you would switch to a mostly, even ideally entirely, but a whole food plant-based diet, there's a good chance that will reverse your disease in large part and reduce significantly the chances of a second or subsequent heart attack. Many patients would say, well, hey, doc, that seems really extreme to me. And the people like me would say, we say it much more thoughtfully and carefully. Well, otherwise what's going to happen is a surgeon's going to have to take some veins from your leg and put you on the general anesthesia, crack your chest, put you on cardiopulmonary bypass, stop your heart from beating for a few hours, connect those vessels to where your gunked up coronaries are, and then all goes well, get your heart beating again, and send you to the ICU for a week and take you off the pump, and go through the consequences of recovering from surgery. And so you have to say to yourself, well, what's really extreme here, right? That's of course said much more thoughtfully and carefully for those of us that might say that. So, okay, next. So just getting a little into the biochemistry and genetics, just briefly, and I'll most of us here aren't scientists or clinicians. But if you compare whole food plant-based diets versus animal product heavy diets, cholesterol, lipid metabolism, the bad lipids versus good lipids, bad fats, good fats. TMAO is a marker of inflammation. It's when it's higher in the bloodstream, it's a higher risk of all the bad diseases, starting with heart attacks and strokes we've been talking about. It's trimethylamine oxidase. I think I've got that right. The TMAO is how you'll find it on a lab test in a hospital. And cardiovascular events in general, heart attacks, strokes, and the rest, are markedly increased in animal heavy diets and markedly decreased with a whole food plant-based diet. So a little bit of genetics. Sorry, telomeres are the ends of our chromosomes. So we all have 23 pairs, 46 chromosomes. The chromosomes shrink. Their length decreases as we age, and until they get to it really has a lot to do with aging. Until they get to a place where they're so shrunken they can't replicate anymore, and that's when we're starting to see the end of this life, and much increased risk of disease. So that's a sort of kind of a natural aging process, and the rate at which the chromosomes get shorter and the telomeres, the ends of the chromosomes damage, is quite correlated with diet. Whole food plant-based diet happens much less quickly. Animal heavy diet much more quickly. Epigenetics is the impact of. So we have our chromosomes, we have our base pairs, we have our genetics plugged in, sort of. But there are lots of biochemical, genetic, molecular, and environmental bases to affect how our genes are expressed. That's called epigenetics. So beyond the Watson and Crick base pair universe, and here too, it's the same story over and over. Whole food plant-based diets facilitate better demonstration of healthier gene expression, less inflammation, better health. Microbiome is our gut bacteria, and in the interest of time and my not diving too deep into microbiology, our microbiome, our gut flora, our gut bacteria are usually important to our health, and people that eat a vegan diet or close have much healthier gut flora. It's another impact on health and on anti-inflammation. All right, that was the heaviest duty science slide. Get asked a fair amount about what about plant-based meats? Tofurkey and all the rest have been around for a while. Now there's newer plant-based quote unquote meats, Impossible, Beyond, and so on, which are so no animals harmed in the production, no animal products whatsoever, but they're produced to taste more like quote unquote real meat, and so they're higher in saturated fat and salt than a plant-based diet. So the question is, are they as unhealthy as meat, as eating meat from an animal? Study out of Stanford just earlier this year took a bunch of folks who meat eaters. They were randomized. Half of them in the first 8 weeks ate no real meat, ate only plant-based meat. The other half of the group kept their regular diet, and then at 8 weeks they were switched. The folks who were on a plant-based diet went back to their regular diet. The folks on the regular diet ate beyond meats, as opposed to animal product meat. What was interesting was that, and somewhat reassuring, that the markers of inflammation, the markers of some of the markers of damage from an animal product heavy diet were decreased or improved on the 8 weeks on Beyond, on fake meat, if you will. Much lower TMAO, that marker of inflammation. Lower LDLs, low density lipoproteins, that's the bad cholesterol, bad lipids, and a decrease in weight as well, interestingly. Well, it's also quite interesting, at least for the science-minded folks, that the folks that were randomized first to plant-based meat, the people that had plant-based meat the first 8 weeks, their TMAO stayed lower, their bad inflammation stayed lower, even when they went back to regular meat. And so the hypothesis is that that's due to an improvement in microbiome. Our gut bacteria is uglier, is not as good when we eat meat or other animal products, and it is a healthier, more protective, inflammatory reducing microbiome when we stay off of real meats. And so this demonstrates, from a science point of view, or at least suggests that the impact or the improvement on health can last for some period of time, even when one goes back to regular meat. Not to encourage that, but just to note that. So the science here is real. My own sense, because there's not a lot of science, not a lot of studies on these newer, heavy saturated fat and pretty salty plant-based meats. My own general sense is, and this is now off the science, and my general view of the subject, that they are healthier than eating real meat, and less healthy than eating a whole food plant-based diet, the kind of diet we've talked about. And so I think, and I eat these once in a while, and I, I mean, everybody's different, everything in moderation, but I wouldn't encourage those people that eat a plant-based diet and are comfortable eating a whole food plant-based diet, and you have a little bit of this once in a while. It's probably, from a health point of view, it's fine, but I wouldn't encourage people to load up on this if you're already a vegan, and nearly so. On the other hand, if one is omnivorous and looking to transition to change one's diet incrementally, these foods are probably less bad for us, and certainly can help in a transition to a healthy diet. All right, I always enjoy this slide. Excuse me for humoring myself, but the first question, right, that those of us that have been vegan for a while, and by the way, I've been I've been vegetarian for 30 years and vegan for 18 years. So I, like many other people, I came to it, um, not as a child or a teenager. Um, gorillas, elephants, right? They find a way to get enough protein, don't they? And so do we. And there's a lot, I didn't show them here, but there's lots of vegan bodybuilders and uber athletes and all the rest. And so it is just um, a myth, and I can use stronger language, but I'll behave here. It's a myth that there's a challenge getting protein from a plant-based diet. So the next two slides, the first will be just a few myths, and the next slide will be a macro and micronutrients. So just a few common myths. There are many others, and during the Q&A, I'm happy to talk about some more. So, right, one myth is vegan diets are not healthy. Well, that's wrong. Vegan diets, plant-based diets are much healthier. They are much healthier. If somebody is finding a way to just eat, 1 or 2 or 3 plant-based items and nothing else and doesn't have some diversity, well, that can be unhealthy. And one's not getting enough calories, that can be unhealthy. In general, on a population basis, eating a vegan diet is way healthier than eating a animal product-based diet. There's no question about that, and gobs of science on that. Well, so the next myth: all vegans are healthy. The opposite myth, right? Well, vegans are and near vegans are much healthier on a population basis. But it's not as we all get sick and we no one lives forever. So one shouldn't be shocked if for ourselves we have a disease or someone we know that's eating a vegan diet gets a disease. It's much more protective of health, well-being, longevity, disease prevention, and treatment. But it's not 100%, but it's quite meaningful, usually meaningful. So from the physical science to the psychology. So vegans are preachy. You hear it all the time. I don't think vegans are preachy. I think that a lot of folks that aren't vegan or near vegan, get that it's good for their health, it's good for the environment. It obviously speaks to compassion and ethics and faith, and so people are predisposed to have a negative reaction if they feel like someone's giving them advice about what to do with their diet, a very personal kind of thing. Sometimes in psychology, we talk about cognitive dissonance, which the shorthand would be, let's say for somebody who's not vegan and is otherwise leading a good life, and tries to behave ethically and otherwise. Well, that person says, "Well, I'm not vegan. I eat meat, and I'm an ethical person, so it must be good. It must be okay to eat animals for health, environment, faith, ethical reasons." So that's cognitive dissonance. I'm a good person. I eat animals. It's got to be good to eat animals. I think that's where a lot of the vegans are preachy comes from. There is a fair amount of anger amongst some vegans, of course, that knowing on an ethical basis, knowing the horrendous conditions the animals that are raised and slaughtered for food to live and die under, and get angry. And there's environmental activists more and more as well. Clinicians, doctors, and others tend not to be as angry about the subject, probably based upon a professional environment. So I think that's sometimes true. People don't. Almost no one changes. There's probably exceptions, but almost no one changes when somebody says, "You're doing a terrible thing. Stop doing it." That's obviously not a way to affect change. I don't think most vegans are preachy. So being vegan it's for white people. It's for a bunch of rich white young women. It's the stereotype in my country. It's so there are around the globe, of course, there are particularly East Asian and South Asian populations that eat a much higher percentage of plant-based diets based upon a culture and faith. In the United States and Canada, it's to pick a different ethnic group. It's interesting because, and most people don't know this, that African Americans in the U.S., and African Canadians are 2 to 3 times as likely to eat a vegan diet as white people in North America. And most people don't know that. There's this sort of Hollywood chic kind of image of this, young white woman who's the poster child for veganism, and it ain't so. Eating a plant-based diet is not healthy for pregnant women nor children. I'm a pediatrician, and I can give talks on that subject. It's an hour or more. But the short answer is that's not true. It's a couple of things to be attentive to, and it's healthier to eat a plant-based diet than not. Pregnant women and children as well. Obviously, infants breastfeeding is best, but that's a whole nother discussion. All right, so to nutrients. So where do you get your protein from? Well, it's if one is eating a diet that's reasonably varied, and getting enough calories a day, it depends on the person's age and gender and height and so on. But let's say 2,000 calories a day is something like an average. And you're getting a variety of plant-based foods. It's impossible. It is impossible, absent some bad diseases. There are a few rare diseases, but for 99% of us, it's impossible to be protein deficient if you're eating a plant-based diet with just a little bit of diversity, and you're getting 2,000 calories a day. There's plenty of protein in plant-based foods, and so clearly, legumes have lots of protein, but other plant-based foods do as well. They're loaded with protein, and it's just not an issue. The average North American eats 3 to 4 times as much protein as one needs to eat, and probably at a certain point that's not healthy and for the kidneys and maybe liver and otherwise. People talk about complete proteins. It is true. So there are 20 amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. Meat has all 20 amino acids because you're eating from the animal. Most plants don't have all 20 amino acids. Most have most of them, but you don't have to eat all 20 amino acids at the same sitting. Just have to get them over time. So you just have a few different plant-based sources and good to go. It is you just don't see there's no issue. I'm probably getting wired here, but there's no issue with getting enough protein, and there's no issue with getting enough of each of the 20 amino acids. 8 to 10 of the 20 amino acids are not produced by our body, so we have to eat them from exogenous sources, and it is never a problem. So what about calcium? What about milk? We get plenty of calcium, especially from green leafy vegetables, from legumes especially. There's some in nuts and so on. We get plenty of calcium. There's no issue if anybody's worried about getting enough calcium, and maybe women worry about it more than men for osteoporosis reasons. Pregnant women perhaps especially. But if anybody's worried about getting enough calcium, and again, there's plenty in green leafy vegetables and legumes. So have a glass a day of one of the plant-based milks. Look on the label. Most of them have 25 to 40% of the recommended daily allowance, the RDA, for calcium. So no different than drinking cow's milk. That's an easy way to kind of cover your bases. We get plenty of iron from plant-based sources. In the medical jargon, there's heme and non-heme iron. Heme iron comes from meat, comes from animal sources. Non-heme comes from plant-based sources. What's really interesting, when I was young, the teaching a while ago, the teaching was that the more iron, the better. And it's not true, because iron, you need to get enough iron because it affects various enzymes and obviously for red blood cells. Too much iron is a bad thing. Too much iron can be inflammatory and also raises the risk of some cancers. So if one is eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, don't take too much iron. Don't take iron supplements. Too much iron is not a good thing. We get enough from plant-based sources. What's also strikingly interesting, and one of those factoids that I think feels good for those of us in the whole food plant-based set, when one eats non-heme iron, plant-based iron, if one's a little bit short on the amount of iron in our body, will absorb more. If one has enough to maybe too much iron, will absorb much less of the non-heme iron. So it's auto-regulating. Whereas for heme iron, if you eat it, you absorb it. So if you have too much and you eat it, you're going to have too much. All right, let's get to the one or two micronutrients that we need to be especially attentive to as plant-based people. Well, vitamin D everybody should be attentive to. So B12, um, um, B12 is something that people that are eating a vegan diet should be attentive to. It's supplemented in some foods. It's hard to come by in plant-based sources. You can find it in yeast and some other sources. Um, I think it's interesting because people think, well, you get your B12 from animals. Um, the cattle that are raised for human consumption, uh, the farmers, if that's the right term, feed them B12 because they're not getting enough B12 from natural sources. Some vegans will say to me, well, I shouldn't have to take a supplement. I should be able to get enough B12 from nature. It's natural. Well, it's kind of true, except that we're not, most of us at least, aren't living in nature. We're living in Boston or San Diego or Brasilia or Hanoi or Berlin or Colombo or wherever we might be living. We're not living in nature for the most part. Our ancestors used to get B12 from soil and the bacteria in soil, and didn't wash vegetables the way that we do today. And so it comes, B12 comes from bacteria in the soil, and we're not getting that much anymore. It's also possible that our ancient ancestors had a very different microbiome and had enough B12 producing bacteria in their gut that's where they got their B12 from. In any event, you can find enough sources in food if you're attentive and careful. I take a B12 supplement, and that's the one place that vegans can get into trouble. So don't skimp on B12. You can't take too much B12. It's a water-soluble vitamin. If you take too much, you just pee it out. Get your B12. Vitamin D, this is for vegans and vegetarians and non-vegetarians alike. It really depends where you live and if you're outdoors. I'm in Boston. It's almost wintertime now, so my skin's not seeing a lot of sunlight. So I take vitamin D. And interestingly, there's been some studies as a sidebar comment that about people with higher vitamin D levels seem to do better when they get COVID. The people with low vitamin D levels are more likely to have a severe case of COVID and or die from COVID. And that's true for some other diseases too. So if your face and upper arms, if your face and arms are seeing, let's say 20 minutes of sunlight a day, every other day on average, or more exposure than that, you don't need vitamin D. And if you're not, you should take vitamin D. Simple as that. So B12, maybe D. Bob in San Diego probably doesn't have to worry about it like I have to worry about it in Boston. It just is. And of course, if again, back to our ancient ancestors, if they hadn't made the mistake of traveling out of sub-Saharan East Africa and populating the world, they were getting plenty of vitamin D through skin and sunlight. Omega-3. So that's one of the healthy fats. It's important to get enough omega-3. You can get it from green leafy vegetables, especially from seeds and nuts, walnuts, almonds, chia, flax. I eat a fair amount of that, as I alluded to earlier. If not, it's probably not a bad idea to take an omega-3 supplement. The science is not clear, but I think if one just eats some nuts and seeds daily, you're covering omega-3. This is I mention this because this is the reason why, or a main reason why people say that eating fish is good for us for the omega-3. There's lots of bad stuff in fish, there's mercury and other contaminants. There's of course the ethical side of that as well for many of us. From a health point of view, you can get enough omega-3 from seeds and nuts, and not a supplement once a day is probably not a bad idea. The science is unclear on that. What about soy? What about dairy? There's and this is big time in the myth universe. There's this belief that because there are some organic compound subcomponents of soy that are organic chemistry wise, probably third cousins of estrogens. Phytoestrogens is the term. That could raise the risk of breast and gynecologic cancers for women, and it could cause feminization, or pardon the expression, man boobs in men. And that's just BS. It's just not true. When populations are studied, when women who have eaten soy from early in life, and there's been studies done in China particularly, are followed, have much, much lower incidence of breast cancer than people, the women in the West. So soy is good for us, and it's and the phytoestrogen story is bunk. What about dairy? Well, when you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, while many um, animals eat other animals, and there's a whole philosophical conversation which is really unresolvable about, did humans evolve to eat meat or not? And my own view is that we evolved in a way like bears and pigs to be very um, um, very broad. We can eat most anything and survive. If you look at where humans live around the globe, it speaks to that. Um, so so we don't need to eat meat clearly, but in terms of dairy, we are the only species on this planet, the only species that consumes the milk of another species. It's it's really a little weird in some ways. It is, except for the advertising folks at the American Dairy Council and their buddies at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and in other countries, similar organizations. You don't need to drink milk to be healthy, and milk is not healthy. Give a whole long story on that. I will spare you now, but there's lots about milk that's not healthy. Get your calcium from elsewhere, um, um, and I guess the one thing I would add would be that lactose, which is the milk sugar, and of course we're all born with that because we're drinking mom's milk, breast milk, first 6, 12, 24 months. About 1/3 to 1/2 of whites, um, well, that's a little bit high, probably about 20 to 30% of whites, about 1/3 to 1/2 of Africans, and 75 to 90% of Asians lose lactose in our guts, the enzyme that digests milk sugar, by teen years, and so we were not about, and so you get sick if you drink milk. For many of us, you don't need milk. Supplements. So just to hammer this home, make sure you get your B12, and if you're living where I live, just get your D, and that's the whole story. That's all you got to think about. That's pretty much the whole story. Get B12. If you're not getting sunlight, get D, and eat a variety of healthy whole food plant-based nutrients, and you're good to go. All right, I'm winding down now. So why don't clinicians, nurse practitioners, physicians assistants, dietitians who are better, or at least less worse, doctors and others do more? Well, we're not trained. When I was in medical school, and I graduated from medical school in 1979, we had about 3 hours of training on nutrition in 4 years. And today in US medical schools, students get 3 hours of training in most schools on nutrition. It's shocking and arguably criminal and needs to change. There's a few schools that are doing much better about that, but just a few. And one of our long-term goals at Penn is to affect change on that around the world. And that's nutrition. That's not even whole food plant-based nutrition. That's nutrition. What I would like to see is not having doctors get a class on nutrition. And this is maybe beyond our talk today, but having in medical school, when you're learning about the heart, learning about physiology and pathophysiology and heart drugs, learn about nutrients at the same time, the nutrients and how that impacts heart disease and heart wellness. It's so that it should be embedded in the curriculum. Change is hard. Change is hard for doctors, for patients, for everybody. Well, genetics, I'm trying to be cutesy here. It's Darwin's fault. We evolved from scarcity. Our ancestors, they didn't die from heart attacks and strokes and type 2. They died from accidents and trauma and infection, and particularly malnutrition, as in not getting enough calories, starvation, so leading towards death. So we're programmed to gorge, to eat calorie-dense foods, and so I think that adds to the challenge. Physicians don't know what to write. What's the prescription? What's the drug? What do you do about a whole food plant-based diet? Haven't been trained to answer patient questions. Most practices don't have adequate support. There aren't enough dietitians around. We need more dietitians. And we need dietitians embedded in medical practices to both counsel patients and to educate physicians and other clinicians. And then I think there's the ability of physicians and other clinicians to offer personal anecdotes and one's own cognitive dissonance. You know, I'm a doc and I eat meat. It's a little hard to encourage my patients to not eat meat. All right, this is a laundry list of useful organizations. So you can see I put my organization, Pan-USA, and we're Global Pan-International. At the bottom, Nutrition Facts, that's Dr. Michael Greger's organization. Wonderful source, highly encourage it. Blue Zones, we talked about. Lighter.world is the only for-profit here. Lighter helps people transition to a plant-based diet. Many universities have good programs, and Harvard's got a particularly good one on nutrition. PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, does really, really good work, really impressive work. I mentioned the Lifestyle Medicine. Plantrition Project educates, it's Plantrition as in plant-based clinicians, educates clinicians and the public in the benefits and value of whole food plant-based diets. Balance.org is an organization that works to get more plant-based choices around the world in schools, universities, and hospitals. Hospital food is it's gotten tastier, but hasn't gotten healthier for the most part, which is another striking sort of thing. I would add as a quick anecdote, and I'm probably going past my time now, but I've been going to medical staff meetings since the end of my residency, the early 80s. I stopped 5 years ago when I left clinical practice. And the first 10 years I went to medical staff meetings, they're all dinners. It's sort of mostly a little bit of business. Mostly they're places that people just hang with colleagues and have fun and so on. First 10 years, a lot of docs were smoking cigarettes, which ages me. You don't see that, of course, at all anymore, at all. The dinners served though were always these fatty, fairly rare, thick steaks with a baked potato with gobs of sour cream on top of it. So now at medical staff dinners, at least the ones that I've been to, that's one of the three choices. The second choice is chicken and fish, and the third choice is vegetarian or vegan. So there's been some progress, but still, a lot of the docs still choose the unhealthy choice or choices. So balance.org works to improve hospital, school, and university diets. And with a local champion, we'll partner with you and will affect change. Wholesome Wave is especially focused on communities of color and communities of poverty or relative poverty, and so that plant-based diets are not seen as this cool gentrified sort of thing to be doing, but for all of us. And as I said earlier, there's actually a high prevalence of plant-based diets amongst some populations of color, just not talked about as much. But Wholesome Wave is especially about relatively impoverished communities. And PAN, my organization, which I've mentioned. So a few words about PAN as we wind down. We engage health professionals, the public, and policymakers about the role of whole food, plant-based nutrition in promoting good health and preventing and treating disease. We strive to make nutrition a key part of education, particularly for medical students. We spend a lot of time educating medical students. Empower health professionals by providing, it's all evidence-based, educational material, effective nutrition programs, and resources. I've tried to be very careful in the talk today to be evidence-based as well. Building a global network of health professionals, scientists, and students, and creating a medical organization globally to promote policy change in terms of the benefit value of whole food plant-based diets. One more Greger quote: "We should all be eating fruits and vegetables as if our lives depend on it, because they do." And here's again my contact info on the bottom. U.S. Medical Director, and do a lot of international development work for PAN. So I spend a lot of time on our global work. There's my email and my phone numbers. And on the top left, how to reach PAN USA, and PAN International on the top right. And the second URL, the second website link there is contact us. If you click on that, you can sign up, and we'll send you fact sheets and email updates and social media and all the stuff that charities are good at doing. So I would encourage people very much to sign up with us. And I believe that's a wrap. So I am happy now to take any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it.
So, Alan, there's a question here for you.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
what about being mostly vegan? So, reducing maybe a little bit of fish, a little bit of chicken. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, and again, I'm here today speaking as a physician, talking about individual human health. So I'm not talking about ethics or faith or the environment, um, or broader population, um, um, like antibiotic resistant kind of health issues. All about our own individual person health. From that point of view, because of course there are other issues around um, eating a little bit of meat, but the other issues, there's really no evidence. If one gets to 90 to 95% vegan, um, that the evidence to date is that that's as healthy as 100%. Um, so, and the diets that are reducitarian like diets, like the Mediterranean diet, um, are healthy. Um, so, so, um, um, so from a health point of view, um, you get to 95% vegan, and you're good to go. There may be other reasons for many of us to be fully vegan. Change is also incremental. So, and I work very hard to um, encourage people and to applaud positive change as opposed to we haven't gotten all the way there. But from a health point of view, 95% is good enough.
And we got one more question here. Somebody's asking, what are the prime motivators for people who choose to become vegan?
Well, yeah, and so and of course that was thank you, thanks Charles. That was wrapped up in my talk, and so the um, from what I've seen with my primarily North American focus, the great majority of people that I connect with, which is not a randomized sample, um, choose to become vegan either for health reasons or ethical compassion reasons, given the horrors of factory farming. Um, there's a increasing percentage of people, especially young people, becoming vegan or nearly so for environmental reasons because of the climate change, or as many might call climate crisis, and 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 eating animals has a material impact on that. So there's an increasing number of people who become vegan or nearly so because of the environment. Most people, it's health or compassion. Many people, it's wrapped together, and of course, there's cultural and faith-based reasons. I mean, speaking as a board member at Dharma and to this group, and I talked earlier about the Seventh Day Adventist, and there are other populations, Hindu population in South Asia that um, many people will consume dairy, but not meat on a faith or cultural basis. So there's lots of faith-based reasons. In North America, it's mostly health and compassion, and an increasing, especially young person environment impact. So thanks, Charles.
Yeah. I
And oh, go ahead, Bob.
just had one more question. Let me see if I can see this here. Yeah. So, and you probably heard this as a DVA board member and treasurer of our board and all, but a lot of Western teachers will say, Western Buddhist or Dharma teachers will say that they've tried a vegan diet for some period of time or maybe very short time. They just didn't feel right. And then so they change. They go back to eating animal flesh and everything.
Yeah, I hear that from time to time, and there's no when it's studied scientifically, when one looks at that in a rigorous scientific way, one doesn't find that. It's very hard to do. You can't do a blinded study. You can't really, because people know what they're eating. So it's hard to be pure science about it. I think that for many people, um, they're not feeling entirely well for other reasons, which may be psychological or otherwise, and people put two and two together and get five. So that's one reason. I, I think that one can eat an unhealthy um, vegan diet as well. I mean, you can eat, sweet chili chips and Nutter Butters and Oreos and drink beer all day long, and that's vegan too. Not encouraging that, but so if one has a fairly um, varied whole food plant-based diet, and when somebody's transitioning, it's if somebody's starting to feel that, and how much of that is really physiologic and how much is whether it's physiological or psychological, it is. I mean, if it's psychological, it is. I would encourage people to not, not feel like I have to eat a kale and spinach and lentil salad every day. Eat a big old pasta dish with some tofurkey and throw in some, onions and peppers and a lot of tomato sauce and, eat some robust kinds of food that will have you feel full up and transition to a even healthier diet more quickly. But that diet's much healthier, much healthier than a plant-based diet. So I hear that from time to time. I don't hear it that much. I think that it's probably a combination of maybe changing too dramatically or not having a balanced enough diet. And sometimes there are family or cultural or emotional aspects to that as well, which are hard to get at, but can be real. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
And we get a question from Susan. She's on our Zoom with us. She's asking, what about iodine? I have to take a 150 UG supplement because I'm completely whole foods plant-based. I eat no iodized salt and no seaweed.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I didn't speak to iodine, and I actually just wrote a note to myself that maybe I should include that in my subsequent talks. It's iodine used to be a huge problem. Again, speaking from the U.S. point of view, till about 100 years ago, when salt was iodized as the place for primary supplements. There are other places for supplements as well. Some other foods have iodine in it, but I've cut back on my salt because I'll be 67 next month, and in spite of a healthy diet, if I eat too much salt at this age, my blood pressure starts to trickle up, and if I don't, it stays really healthy low. So I think for some people, an iodine supplement can be a thoughtful thing to do. It's the primary supplement, at least in this country, in the country I'm sitting in right now, is salt. And if you're not using iodized salt, you should think about it. You can take another easy thing to do is to take a multi-mineral once a day. Some people are purists and don't like to do that because I should get it from nature, from my diet. It's easy thing to do to pop one a day multivitamin a day and not think about this stuff anymore either. So I do think that I think that iodine is something that one should think about, particularly if one is not adding salt to one's diet, at least in this country. Thank you. That's a really good question. Thank you.
So maybe any other questions out there?
I think that was all the questions for the moment.
Wonderful. So that was wonderful, Alan. I want to thank you very much for this. And to say, so Charles, we're going to be, so this has been streaming both on Facebook and YouTube, but also you're going to post the video up there so that people can see it both on YouTube and Facebook? That
is correct.
Okay, so maybe I say safely later in the weekend or beginning of next week, you can look for it. I'm going to go take a look myself because I took a lot of notes. I've been vegan for 16 years, and there's a lot of this I didn't know, so I found this really interesting. Thanks so much, Alan, for doing this. And we're going to have you back again soon. And I just want to mention, thank you all for joining us, and for those of you that participated. Next time we do this, we're going to give you lots of notice in our e-newsletter. We're going to post it on social media. We're going to try to have on a wide variety of speakers. So health, nutrition, very important. We're going to have on some plant-based chefs from around the world, talk about recipes and what you can do at home. Try to keep the recipes fairly simple. I'm thinking from Thailand and Vietnam and even South Africa. We're going to have a really well-known vegan chef, I hope, on very soon. And the last thing is just a reminder, please, if you've listened to Alan's talk today, presentation, if you're connected anyway with DVA, if you're not a member, please go to our website, dharmavoicesforanimals.org, and go to the top, and there's a drop-down menu, become a member is where you go. Takes about a minute and a half to become a member. Tell your friends and family about it, because we really want to grow our membership. This is how we're going to grow our influence in the world, to be a voice for animals, to speak out in Buddhist communities, approximately 1 billion Buddhists around the world, to speak out about all the terrible suffering that animals go through before they wind up on our plate. So thanks all for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Thanks again, Allan, and thank you, Charles.
Thank you.